Hello everyone, welcome to Imprint Knowledge Solution. I'm Varun Kala, and today I'll be taking your daily news discovery for the day that is 16 November 2018. Right. So before we start, what all we will be cover will be first spotting the various news articles and their categorization. We'll be explaining the various editorials, connecting news with static portion of the syllabus. We'll be looking into the prelim questions. We're looking at a question which came in 2014 that was on the East Asia Summit. We're looking at that. Then we'll basically have a couple of questions from the mains as well, and we'll be actually giving solutions to these in one of the videos at the end of the week, right? Okay, so let's start. Right. So the first thing we have is on page number 1, that is judicial vacancies and other issues related to judiciary. From page it has on 3 to 13, right? That is 3 or 13. Then we have Indo-Pacific region and India, that is on page number 14 to 22. Then we have the Brexit deal on 23 to 27 page, and then we have the Afghan peace process from 28 page to 31st page, and then we have miscellaneous GS2, and then we have an article on RBI on page 36. There are some other miscellaneous GS3 questions. The special topics that we're discussing today are drought and forest fire. Right, general studies too. We're looking at polity and governance and international relations right now. So let's look at that. So the major question today, the news item 1 today, is the Supreme Court pulling up the states for not recruiting judges, right? And it says that a bench led by Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi says that more than 5,000 vacancies are there, right? There are empty chairs, and as of 31st March, 24% of the judicial positions in lower coast are vacant nationwide. And Supreme Court has said that 5,133 out of 22,000 posts were vacant in subordinate courts. Okay, and the most of them are actually, if you think about UP and Bihar, and you can actually think about the fact that if there are no judges, definitely there'll be a idea of lawlessness there. So that's the reason why this is the case. Okay, just to have an idea, overall, India just has one judge over a population of 58,800. The Law Commission 2014 study found that at the current rate of disposal, the High Court requires additional 56 judges to break even and 942 judges to clear the backlog. That is there, right? The Law Commission actually had recommended that the judge ratio should be 50 judges per million population. Okay, so that is actually much larger than what we have right now, right? Then we have, as I've already mentioned, the vacancies, right? Vacancies in sanction strength in Supreme Court and lower court and high court, everywhere there is there, right? So what are the major issues? Now the question which will come in the UPSC mains and prelims should be related to either the article of the Constitution regarding the judicial appointments, that is Article 124, or otherwise they will talk about judicial vacancies, appointments in judiciary, pending of cases, non-compliance of RTI with judiciary, judicial corruption, and judicial overreach. These are the major topics that you are supposed to be ready with a quick answer with, in mains. Okay, so you should have an answer on judicial vacancy. That's what we're looking into. Then judicial appointments, whether how it should be done, should we do, whether the NJAC was good or bad. Then pending cases, right? What we do on judicial pendency, non-compliance of RTI by judiciary. Then there is, also judicial corruption and judicial overreach, right? I think the major question which would come actually would be on judicial overreach rather than anything else, or judicial vacancies or pendencies. Okay, there'll be a little less chance of they're going into a controversial area such as appointments. So what are the advantages and disadvantages, right, of collegium system, right? You can go through this and this that is this article. So the collegium system was introduced under 1993, under which no outsider had any role to play under selection of and appointments of judges to High Court and Supreme Court. Okay, and collegium today right now is for the 3 senior most judges of the High Court, headed by a CG of the Pacific Court. Okay, and recommends the name of the lawyers and lower court judges to the Supreme Court for elevation to the bench. And law ministry had little stay on this, and the idea is that even if the executive objects to a candidate, if they reiterate, they have no choice but to agree to the reiteration. That is So that is very, very important. So please go through this, especially the advantages of having a collegium system and not having collegium system as well. Then the other issue we have is in India, we have very few women judges. There are no women judges in 8 high courts, that is J&K, Himachal, Uttarakhand, Meghalaya, Manipur, Tripura, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh. So obviously, if you look at the vulnerable section, we feel that they are actually vulnerable because there are very, very few judges to protect them. Okay. Sikkim obviously has one female judge, and Delhi has the highest with the 10 women judges. Then we have, as we talked about, in court staff, there are 41,000 vacancies in court staff itself, right? So that actually tells you that it would be very difficult for any kind of judicial functions to be actually be executed, right? So there's not obviously no infrastructure as well, accommodation is not available, and that was a major case, right, in UP as well, that there is no accommodation for judicial, right? Then pending cases, as we talked about, there are 3.3 crore pending cases, 2.26 crore pending trial courts, 45 lakh in high courts, 65,000 in Supreme Court, and typically it's expected that most of them will stay pending for the next 15-20 years. And that's another thing that I think you can use this data in your answer as well. Then what are the solutions to speed up the Indian judiciary? Now, in any answer, you're supposed to answer with the solutions. So number one is to increase the strength of the judiciary. Number two, to keep courts open throughout the year. Number three, the modernization of courts. Number four, introduction of fast track courts. And this has been done in commercial cases and in the case of, let's say, women, right? The Nirbhaya case led to fast track courts for women violence. Modernization courts, some kind of modernization has happened. There are cases where e-governance or e-judiciary, e-courts have been started, right? Courts should be open throughout the year. They have in holidays in the summer, right? So that is another problem. Then there are a lot of archaic laws. I think they should be struck down very quickly. And the judiciary should actually accept, typically go for arbitration and not allow, flippant cases, right? And there is a need for increasing arbitration as well, along with all these points. Remember the fact that the judiciary is very, very expensive, right? The cost of litigation to the people, right, is very, very expensive. Like 30,000 crore is spent every year, and 50,000 crores is lost every year by businesses because of litigation, right? So basically, if you think about it, this itself tells you that the lack of a speedy judiciary, this is the main reason it is costing us this. Okay, now the final this article is on the editorial page of the Hindu today, and it talks about the separation of powers, whether or not it has been observed in India. Now, there has been a recent criticism of the judgments of the Supreme Court that it has become hyper-activist in making laws. Okay, it has started to legislate instead of actually being a court of interpretation of the Constitution and of laws. Now, this question actually has been answered in Ram Jawaya versus State of Punjab 1955, that is. Our Constitution does not contemplate assumption by one organ or part of the state of functions essentially belonging to another. So it basically says that there should be broad separation of powers among the three organs, that is judiciary, executive, and the legislature. And obviously, in Deo Nandan Agrawal, Deoki Nandan Agrawal was a Union of India. It has been observed that the power to legislate has not been conferred on the courts. And same way in Suresh Sheth versus Commissioner Indore Municipal Corporation, right? The court also observed in 2005 that our constitution scheme, the parliament, legislature, assembly, they exercise sovereign power to enact laws, right? And judicial discipline should be observed, right? And the court should not make any laws. But there have been recent cases, and let's look at those which actually look at in a very different way. The most recent one was the Diwali Firecracker issue, right? In Arun Gopal versus Union of India, the court had fixed bursting, what time you could burst Diwali fireworks, and prohibited the use of non-green fireworks, although there are no laws to that effect. Then we have MC Mehta versus Union of India, right? It annulled the statutory rule 115/21 of the Central Motors Vehicle Rules 1989, when it directed that no BS4 vehicle which should be sold after 30th March 2020. And only BS6 vehicles could be sold after that. Then we have Subhash Kashinath Mahajan versus State of Maharashtra 2018. It again, amended the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Prevention of Atrocities Act by annulling Section 18, which said that no participatory bail, anticipatory bail can be granted to persons accused under the act. So, again and again they're doing this. And the parliament had to come up with an ordinance basically to abrogate this court judgment. Then Rajesh Sharma versus State of Uttar Pradesh, it felt that Section 498A of the IPC is being misused, right? And basically it said recommended that provision be sent to a family welfare committee constituted by the district legal services authority. And despite the fact there's no such thing in 498, that is the dowry provision, right? Section. Then we have the NGT, that is the National Green Tribunal. It ordered that no 15-year-old petrol-driven or 10-year-old diesel-driven vehicle will ban in Delhi. Okay, and the Supreme Court even directed that they should be impounding such vehicles, right? Even though the NGT or the Supreme Court, they are not legislative bodies, they are not supposed to make these rules, right? So judges themselves are going against the separation of power, and it will lead to uncertainty in the law and chaos, as every judge can actually now start drafting his own laws according to his whims and fancies, and therefore this is a need that this is stopped as soon as possible. Right. I think that all of you should write an answer on judicial activism and judicial over activism, definitely. Please, I think you make notes out of this article, definitely today. Okay. Then we have an article on PM Modi, favoring the inclusive Indo-Pacific region. PM Modi was at the fifth East Asia Summit. India has been a participant in the East Asia Summit in the very inception, right? It consists of 10 Asian nations, then Australia, China, India, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, Russia, and the US, right? So if you think about it, it's a very interesting summit in which Russia and US both come together. There's China as well, and then there's Japan as well, right? So very interesting, I would say. Okay. There's another article on the Quad from the Indian Express. I think you should know what's a Quad as well, right? And which are the 4 countries in Quad, right? So that's something that I would have read. And typically, if you think about Quad, it's basically a quadrilateral coalition between India, US, Japan, and Australia. The US, Japan, and Australia, right, basically wants to bring stability into the Indo-Pacific region. The idea is that they want to actually counter China, right? And they want to maintain peace, stability, and freedom of navigation South China Sea. Basic idea about, as I was already told, is about thinking about the Quad as a forum of controlling this, freedom of navigation South China Sea, in which actually China is actually building a lot of artificial islands, right? Okay, so let's talk about the Indo-Pacific region. So if you think about the Indo-Pacific region, it has one of the most significant economic features as well as strategic features. Okay, it is one of the most dynamic trade zones, right? We have the Strait of Malacca, we have the Strait of Singapore, we have the Gulf of Hormuz, right? And a majority of the world's oil passes through this. It is rich in, the natural resources, especially hydrocarbons, right? Emerging powers are competing over it. And we have obviously threats to the various maritime trade, freedom of navigation, deep seabed exploration has been thought of. So this basically has become a region of convergence for India, and the US, Australia, Japan, and the Vietnam. And the idea is obviously on China's rise of power, as I talked about, and its increased aggression in the South China Sea. It might be a question which might be asked on India's role in the Asia Pacific region, right? Remember that India-Pacific region, basically in the Indo-Pacific region, constitutes a very significant strategic and security interest for New Delhi, right? The idea is that when China is trying to play the string of pearl, India is trying to basically try and take the help of Japan and others to basically create another circle around China as well. So the idea is that we want to increase engagements and alliances in the region, right? And we want comprehensive, typically, and we want it to be obviously military as well as in trade. Okay, what India has done is there have been 2 things. We have acquired access to Dukum Port in Oman for military use, and also to develop the Aga Lega Island in Mauritius. Please note these 2. I think this would go in your answers, any answer in which countering China. Then we have the Indian Navy has secured a logistic faculty in Singapore. which allow it to refuel and rearm, and it also has similar facilities in Vietnam. Then we also have a logistic agreement with France as well as US, and there are actually failed French military bases across the Indo-Pacific, right? So again, this is something which can go in your answer. Then India and Indonesia are considering development of a port at Sabang, close to the Malacca Strait, and basically the idea is that they will offer the port to India for military use. That's very important. Then we have the Malabar exercises with the US and Japan, right? And they are the largest naval exercises, right? Despite the fact that Quad has not been given a military dimension, it is perhaps the most important grouping, and it's in the future we're thinking that it would actually be used military to counter China as well if needed. India's strategic leverage basically in East Asia is not comparable to China's glowing cloud in the East Indian Ocean. China has actually funded very huge maritime infrastructure projects in Habantota and in Gwadar in Pakistan. So this is something that we definitely need to understand, that we don't have the economic might of China. But on the other hand, India should utilize its opportunities arising in the region. There is a prevailing perception that it has been slow in maximizing the benefits that are arising from the global power shift because of its domestic political concerns. India does need to have a comprehensive and a long-term China strategy, and it needs to protect the region, that is the Indo-Pacific, right? And promotes its foreign policy interests. It also needs to play a very active role in building regional and economic security architecture, right? In simple terms, if I talk about it, the Indo-Pacific, I believe that Indo-Pacific. So if you think about Indo-Pacific, right? Okay, so I'm just making a rough, the idea that okay, this is the right, and this is the region that we're basically trying to target. So idea is that this region is much acceptable or more important to China than maybe the Indian Ocean, where they're trying to encircle India. So the idea is that always that if we actually put pressure here, right, China would actually go slow. Even on the border dispute that we have in the McMahon line, that China would actually be more amenable to India, and obviously with the SAPEC coming from this side, I think that is something that we really need to understand, that this thing this can be used as a pressure point by India to actually counter these two things which we definitely want to do, and also the string of pearls. Okay. Just to have an idea, we had the East India Summit at Punjab. This is the capital of Myanmar, right? Now, you should know which are all countries in this. This can come an objective question, right? Um, Okay, just to have an idea, I already have drawn this diagram. Okay, one thing I would want all of you to do is to practice making this map, especially in the exam. So actually, you should actually draw something like this. So obviously, you should mark this India, and you should mark all the countries here, right? But more than that, you should be ready with a map like this in any exam. Okay, especially regarding the South China Sea, right? So there are a lot of questions which have come under the South China Sea. You should be able to draw the diagram and should roughly make make these and then mark all of this on the map. And this is important. If you don't do this, you'll get one less mark. So somebody else makes it instead of you, he'll get one extra mark here. Okay, as I said, there was a question in 2014. So it says, India is a member of which of the following? 2015 में आया था. And Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, then Association of Southeast Asian Countries, East Asia Summit. So obviously India is not a member of APEC or the ASEAN, right? Though ASEAN, we were invited initially when ASEAN was found in 1967, but answer is B. Now then there have been two mains questions, as we say that we always give two main questions. So it says, with respect to the South China Sea, maritime territorial disputes and rising tensions affirm the need for safeguarding maritime security to ensure the freedom of navigation and flight throughout the region. In this context, talk about the bilateral issues between India and China. And obviously, we talk about India's relationship with Vietnam and other countries vis-a-vis China in this question, right? And then the question is, evaluate the economic and strategic dimensions of India's policy in the context of the post-Cold War international scenario. Right. So the idea became that after we have the main issue, that is the Russian disintegration, that is the Soviet Union disintegration, India needed ally and India needed to expand its trade, and the Southeast Asian tigers basically became our major trade partners, right? Okay. The next topic, the next question which has come is the Brexit. We'll talk about the Brexit in detail in another video because I think the Brexit itself deserves another video, right? I want you all to go through this. Basically, the deal is in trouble, right? Because of two issues, and we'll talk about that. That these two articles, right? You can go through these two articles from the newspaper. I'll urge you to read them. But very quickly, what is the idea? So Theresa May had secured a Brexit divorce settlement of more than 5 pages, which she says delivers on her pledges to take back, the control of laws, border, and money, right? But this has led to resignation of Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab and the Pension Secretary, right? So both of them have basically Esther McQuay and Dominic Raab have resigned. The problem basically is obviously that first the UK is supposed to pay a diverse settlement of $49 billion to cover its payments for the current EU budget and some other financial commitments. The main issue is the UK has agreed to a backstop clause, which will tie the whole of the UK to EU and rules and regulations and avoid basically a hard border. Basically, the main issue is that UK and EU, Britain have a soft border and a porous border, right? There's a free movement from Ireland to the UK. Now, if you think about the UK going out of the EU, Ireland is still in the EU, and that is basically, I think, the main problem with the Brexit. The how will you enforce, an issue, something like that? How would you impose a visa regime when there's a porous border? Okay, so EU citizens' rights will be guaranteed and legally enforced by the withdrawal agreement, and those who wish to stay in UK are invited to apply for special status. So the idea is that EU citizens will be given special status. So again, the question becomes that what was the need of Brexit then? Right? Or was it just politics? And while the disputes over the agreement will be settled by an independent panel, the European Court of Justice will have a final say on matters of law. So again, this is another issue. Uh, Now, what is the problem with a no deal Brexit? Okay, so what happens is if a no deal Brexit happens, it means the UK and EU will be unable to reach a withdrawal and there will be no 21-month transition period. So there will be a sudden change. Now, one day UK will be in EU and the next day it will be not in EU. So, what will happen is that all the businesses, right, will now obviously have a lot of trouble. JP Morgan has already transferred to Frankfurt even before anything like that has happened. They have actually not trusted the British government to actually have a 21-month transition period. So that's another problem. Okay, so what would be the consequences? First problem, the UK would revert to the World Trade Organization rules on trade, right? And it would be no longer bound by EU rules. Will have to face EU's external tariffs, right? It would basically, the price of goods in shops for Britain would go up as businesses will have to pay tariff on goods imported by EU. Will need to actually some kind of tax increases also, and obviously some British made products may be rejected as new authorization and certification, so it will affect trade, especially the exports to Britain. Remember, most of India's business to EU is actually done through the UK because UK is the English-speaking country. So that all the Indian firms would actually need now to actually have offices in different parts of EU, maybe Paris or in Frankfurt. Okay, then manufacturers could move their operations. I've already talked about JP Morgan, a financial institution, moving, but other manufacturers would also move. Then people, obviously, UK would be free to set its own controls on immigrations by EU nationals, and bloc could do the same for Britain, right? Then relevant laws would be transferred. They'll be right. Remember, Britain would no longer have to adhere to the rulings of the European Court of Justice, right? But it would be bound to the European Court of Human Rights, which is a non-EU body, which basically, right? Then money, right? They'll have to pay, the initially 39 billion, but after that they will not pay the annual 13 billion contribution to EU budget. But obviously, there's a lot of EU subsidies, which basically they might lose out to. Then, as I said, right, this is the main issue: the Irish border. The issue of Northern Ireland and the Republic could remain unresolved. While physical infrastructure had been vetoed, the border could become an external frontier for the EU in the event of a no-deal Brexit. And there would be pressure to enforce customs and immigration control here. So, again, right. So, I think all of you should make notes or write an answer what will happen with the Brexit, right? So this is something I would say that definitely you should definitely write an answer on. Okay, then we have an article on India Afghanistan. Okay, this is a standard question. I think in case if you have studied international affairs by now, I think you should be more and well versed with everything that is mentioned in this article. This is by Rakesh Sood, who's found diplomat and also a researcher, a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Right. So the idea is, India basically has a stand that we do not want to engage with Taliban, right? So we departed from that and participated in a non-official event, and we attended a Afghanistan peace process known as the Moscow format in Russia, and this happened on November of 2018. And talks included a high-level delegation from Taliban as well as the Afghanistan High Peace Council among the 12 countries. And it marked the first time that the Indian delegation has been on the table with the talks, right, with Taliban representatives based in Doha. And this basically gives a historic background, right, idea that what has happened. And Rakesh Sood basically gives an idea that what was all happening. So 2005, the idea of reconciliation with Taliban has been, which was around for a decade, basically grew as the insurgency increased. Obama announced the shift to counterinsurgency mode with surge of more than 40,000 troops, but added that there would be phased withdrawal and it would begin in end 2011. Operation Enduring Freedom basically ended formally on December 2014, but it basically handed over the responsibility of combat operation to the Afghan security forces, even as there was more and more insurgency. So the problem was still remaining. Taliban basically said that they opened an office in Qatar, and Qatar authorities continue to host Taliban leaders. After a bitterly contested elections, after Ashraf Ghani moved to improve relations with Pakistan, this was something we didn't like. Then the new initiative, coordination group involving US, China, Afghanistan, Pakistan. Again we didn't like because again India is not a part of either of them. Then Mr. Ghani launched a Kabul process for peace and security conciliation in Feb 2017, and it basically made an unconditional dialogue offer to Taliban. And Taliban rejected this, that they were ready to engage talks with only with the Americans because it's the Americans calling. They don't really trust Mr. Ghani. Then President Donald Trump, South Asia's policy was given at August of 2017. It aimed at breaking the military stalemate by expanding the US and NATO presence, and it put Pakistan on notice and strengthened Afghan capabilities. Right, so this was happening. So what's India's stance been? India has actually been making a lot of Afghan infrastructure projects. It has pledged 3.1 billion assistance. We have Delaram to Zaranj 218-kilometer road project, right, which basically connects India with the port, right, and Chabar. And then we have a 220 kilowatt DC transmission line from Pule Khumri to Kabul, right? So this basically providing electricity to Kabul. Then we have the Salma Dam, right? And then we have the Afghanistan Parliament and the Indira Gandhi Institute of Child Health and Habia School in Kabul again, which has all been funded by India. So basically what has happened is India has actually used soft power and used a lot of NGOs, even SEA works in Afghanistan. And we have been a very strong development partner of Afghanistan. And we basically support Afghan-led and Afghan-owned reconciliation. Definitely, we don't want any Pakistan interference in Afghanistan, but that's very difficult, right? And we tend to have a lot of attacks on the Indian missions in Afghanistan as well. Okay, then we have the next article. This is about India and China agreeing to expand their military ties, right, in the spirit of the informal spirit, that is the Wuhan, right, between India and China. Okay, so the Wuhan spirit has been again called, and that yes, India and China can actually be together, and both of them can actually herald an era of India-Asian domination, right? Whether that happens or not, that's another thing. Then we have the problem of quotas, and now we have Mr. Fadnavis, right, agreeing to the Maratha community having a quota. Right, so again, one of the problems that we're having, the Patidars, the Jats, the Kapus, and even the Reddys, right, in Andhra. Basically, the dominant caste is now asking for reservations, to maintain the dominance. Then Jharkhand is not now open defecation free. I really dislike this thing, right? It's one of the most biggest frauds I feel in India, right? But yeah, you might be asked this question in an objective type, so yeah, I'm mentioning it here. Then let's look at this article. This is the RBI, and we have already talked about the same thing. But go through this always. I think that you should always go through the explained page from the Indian Express every day, and go through this just to have an idea. In case you're preparing for RBI Group B services, this is very very important, especially for interview. In case it has not happened till now. Then there's also a question which is going at NBFC. So both these RBI and the NBFC, they deserve another proper PPT and a proper discussion video. So I'm stopping. I'm not going into that. But what you can do is that you can actually go into the YouTube channel that is Rajspa TV and go through what else. And this is the link I've actually provided here, right? So I typically say that it's better that you do this. Okay, so what was the main issue? The Department of Economic Affairs fears that significant default in large non-banking finance companies and housing finance companies in 6 weeks if no additional liquidity is provided. Why this has happened? Because when the demonetization happened, most of these infrastructure companies went to the NBFCs and they actually took a lot of debt from them because the bank was able to provide anything to them. So that is the basic. If you go, it's actually basically the demonetization which is haunting us even today in this. The DEA, in a letter to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, described the financial situation as still fragile when discussing the financial stability impact of the infrastructure leasing company default, right? So there's a string of defaults in ILFS, right? So basically, it triggered a collapse in the Indian stock market. There's a fear of contagion with the rest of the country's financial sector. So what happened was last month the government took control of the ILNFS and protected the financial system and market and from a potential collapse. The new board has submitted a plan to revive a debt-laden firm this week. $2 trillion of NBFC and HFC debt is due for redemption on December. So again, there's a gap funding of as much as 1 trillion rupees, and that is one of the biggest problems between RBI and the government these days. Okay, then India's trade deficit is rising, and that is, I think, expected. We are actually consuming a lot of more products, electronics, etc., engineering, capital goods, etc., and at the same time, is also the exports are not that great, right? So Indian merchandise trade has widened. Trade deficit was $14 billion, and this is a little more than last year. That is 13.98. Exports in October 2018 was 26.98 billion compared, which is obviously a positive growth. That's a very good sign, I think. Now, rupee terms also, there's been a lot of positive growth of 33%, they say. So, this is good. But imports obviously are, high, and obviously in rupee terms, they're again around the same number, that's 33%. Remember that we also having a currency rate issue. So again, this both is actually impacting us. Oil imports in October 2018 were 14 billion, which is 52% higher in terms of dollar terms last year, right? So again, this is oil imports are even more month to month. So even from September, it has increased by 30%. So this is something you should. What other things you can actually gauge from this article is this: that what actually we are exporting. We're exporting engineering goods, petroleum products. We're exporting gems and jewelry, organic and inorganic chemicals, drugs and pharmaceuticals. So this basically tells you what is India exporting. So that is something I would say that yes, you should basically. So as I said, engineering goods, petroleum products, gems and jewelry, organic and inorganic chemicals, drugs and pharmaceuticals. So this is something that you should know. Okay, then India's rating at Fitch. Fitch is one of the famous. I think there's a question did you on the rating agencies, Fitch, S&P, Moody's, right? And they have given India triple B negative. So this is and Fitch has also basically forecasted our growth, right? At 7.3 in financial year 11, financial year 19, and in 27.5. And they said that the temporary drag will fade from demonetization and GST now. But they say that GST is basically important reform and likely to support growth in the medium term once the teething dissipates. India's 5-year average is obviously highest and in the BBB range. The growth has remained substantial, and they talk about the fact that we are very, very solid. Okay, and RBI is also building a solid monetary policy record. The CPI also is good, so that therefore they're actually pretty happy in that sense. That's what they mentioned in this article. Then we have a super Earth, right? Barnard star B, right? This is something important. They might ask you in some objective type question, right? So this is something I think maybe you should go through to what are exoplanets. That is something, a question which has come in prelims before. So I would say this is there. Then we have a article on Iceland. Ice age crater discovered beneath Greenland. That's something again you should have an idea. Sometimes they ask some these random questions also in objective type. Then Odisha drought package. So now this is something I would say this is very, very important. So drought as a topic. This is, I think, extremely important, and we'll be talking about it. So again, Visayanagram, again drought. So we have actually got some notes on droughts. What are the different types of droughts, right? And I would urge all of you to actually, pause the video here, open a laptop, and try to make these notes yourself as well, right? So the highly powered Committee on Disaster Management, it says it defines a drought any lack of water to satisfy the normal needs of agriculture, livestock, industrial, or human capital, human population may be termed as drought. And there are different types of drought are there. There's old terminology which talks about normal, below normal, above normal, all India drought here, all India severe drought here. And the new terminology talks about normal, below normal, above normal, deficient here, and large deficient here. There's a percentage departure also basically thought of that, if you there's plus minus 10 and whether it's greater than 10% of long period average of rainfall, right? Normally it is thought that if deficiency is more than 10%, right, and when spatial coverage of drought is more than 40%, that is the major problem, right? The rainfall deficiency is the main thing. Then hydrological drought is there. Then when there's surface water, there's a groundwater drought as well. Then there's agriculture drought. Then there's a soil moisture drought, and there's a socio-economic drought. Different, they have a lot of definitions. They have given different types. Then then there are various causes of drought. I would say rainfall degrees are there, deficient rainfall, delay in onset, timely onset, and sudden break. There's an October break which always occurs in the monsoon. Then there's early withdrawal. So basically, if you think about it, drought is one of the biggest calamity because the problem with drought is you don't know that it's occurring, and suddenly it will hit you. Okay, it's like every day is fine. You might think that okay, you are under some kind of stress, but in one day suddenly everything will go totally berserk. So effects of drought, physical impact, it affects the recharge of soil moisture, soil runoff, etc. Soil dry ups, river, lakes, ponds, reservoir also dry up. Then there is obviously impact on agriculture. Then the social economic, there is impact. There's diarrhea, cholera. Shimla also had water scarcity, right? And I think that would also be typically classified as drought. Then there is migration. There is social stress and conflict. Then measures, prevention and procedures should be taken, right? What kind of measures should be taken in a drought-prone area? There should be judicious use of water. There should be community involvement, and there should be capacity building. Then drought-prone area, typically there should be gradation of drought-prone areas, right? So this is again very, very important. Remember that drought differs from other natural hazards. No universally accepted definition is there. What does it mean? It is difficult to determine the beginning and the end of drought also, because it's very slow creepy, as I already talked about. It's a silent spread and gradual withdrawal. There's no indicator under which we can precisely forecast the advent and severity of drought, right? And no project is been able to find a possible impacts. Spatial expanse tends to be greater. It's very difficult. Impacts are generally non-structural and difficult to quantify. The damage to ecology, disruption of socio-economic, fabric of the communities, long-term effect of malnutrition, etc. Obviously, we have before independence we used to have famines, and there was a famine in 1943, and actually it was a result of a drought only. Then there's considerable regional variation in drought. What would classify as a drought in Haryana might not be a drought maybe in Rajasthan. So, and obviously there's a short window during which in India and the southeast west monsoon comes to India, and that is the major problem of drought. So that is the basically reason that there's a recurrence of drought every year. Then there is obviously just variation distribution, uneven distribution. There have been actually questions on this as well, right, regarding drought in a different way, right? That why does India have so many problems, water problems or water scarcity, despite the fact we have so much water. Then there's over exploitation and lack of optimum conservation and storage capacity. and limit irrigation coverage and limitation, because we only have like around 44% under irrigation. So that also impacts and exacerbates the impact of drought. Okay. What should be done to prevention, right? We should expand the irrigation facilities, water augmentation, water harvesting techniques should be there, more crop per drop, right? The famous Nara of Prime Minister Modi, right? For micro irrigation. Transport and communication links must be, made more stronger to ensure supply of food and other commodities. Then, as I talked about before, a drought-prone area delineation based on rainfall, cropping area, etc., should be done. Then, gradation of drought-prone area should be done. Sensitivity, rainfall variation, frequency of occurrence of drought. Especially, I think now even climate change should be actually be taken care of in this. Then dense observation networks should be done. I think we should actually put sensors in most of these areas, and I think we can use AI and big data big time for this. Then mitigation, obviously, we should have drought-resistant varieties. Water guzzling crops in water deficient areas should not be used. Pilot studies should be done in drought-prone areas to suggest long-term mitigation. Then cloud seedings, micro irrigation system, judicious use of various storage structures, crop insurance schemes should be done, and groundwater should also be used. Surface water should be used very judiciously, right? So this is something I think you should definitely go into this, right? This and go. Please revise these 2 pages very thoroughly. Okay, then we have the Californian wildfire, which was also news in a couple of years ago in the Uttarakhand wildfire, right? So, as if in coniferous forest, there's very frequent fire and there's in moist deciduous. And Northeast region basically has the most frequent fires in India. Okay. So what is the major reason for forest fires? It's a very common observation, especially in Uttarakhand, as I talked about it. I'll actually have an article, I'll actually post it along with the video. However, this time fire starts in early February and spread to most forest area in the state. The major reason for fires in Uttarakhand are highly inflammable material of dry chir pine needles and the dry litter of broadleaf trees on forest floor associated with fire, right? So the chir pine basically enroaches on a mixed species area due to its hardy nature as well as ban on green felling above 1000 meters. It covers a significant portion of Uttarakhand. It's itself highly resistant to fire due to thick bark, but fallen dry needles are highly inflammable as its resin ducts are considered main catalyst for fire. So chir pine needles, though obviously are obviously important material for livestock compost, but mass migration of villagers have checked the local utilization of these needles. So obviously this has led to more and more forest fires. The forests are actually inaccessible and there's difficult terrain, and locals are needed to actually help in this. Right, so this is very so most. But actually, if you think about on the other hand, most fires are by human intervention, right? The honey collectors, the tourists, and the graziers, right? And therefore, also forest fires can also occur because of scanty rain and a dry spell in winters. Okay, so with that, we're coming to the end, right? Please, make notes of this, right, in your own handwriting as well. Don't just rely on our notes, come what may, right? Because even if, let's say, we have given you the handwritten notes, remember you have to write in the exam yourself, and that no one is going to stop, help you in the exam, right? Luckily, there's no verbal interview in UPSC at the mains time, that is. Okay, thank you so much, right? If you have any questions, please do post and do comment.